dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also created a new enterprise-wide role, the IC Accessibility Officer, and stood up the ODNI Diversity and Inclusion Group to address DEIA within ODNI. Two of our highest organizational priorities are recruitment, and that includes underrepresented communities, and retention of people who are underrepresented in our workforce. Both Dr. Dixon, my principal deputy, and I have worked to recruit at colleges and high schools where we can reach those communities and expand our overall application pool. Just recently, I visited our partner school, Florida International University, which is primarily comprised of Hispanic students, and Dr. Dixon visited Harris-Stowe State University and HBCU in St. Louis. And of course, we know that our individual efforts will not be enough. We need institutional growth to achieve our goals, and so we've taken the following measures. Across the IC, we have empowered advisory bodies such as the IC Equal Employment Opportunity and Diversity Council and the IC Chief Human Capital Council to focus on these issues. IC elements are collaborating in joint outreach and recruiting in underrepresented communities to reach more candidates, as you'll hear from my colleagues. The IC Centers for Academic Excellence program is being strengthened to increase our reach with more formal marketing, university engagement, recruiting strategies in coordination with IC elements. We've also formed new partnerships across academia, industry, and government with organizations like the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, a national nonprofit focused on increasing STEM involvement for indigenous peoples of North America and the Pacific Islands, and Advancing Minorities' Interest in Engineering, which is an organization that provides a direct connection to accredited engineering schools at top-rated HBCUs. And finally, through initiatives such as ODNI's Adopt a High School program, we are not just focusing academic outreach on colleges and universities. We are inspiring underrepresented communities at the K through 12 levels as well. And there's a lot more we can do, but we need your help with changing policies that hinder program execution. For instance, in a community that prioritizes resources by mission, we found that policies that govern how we can allocate our recruiting dollars can actually hinder recruiting. For example, in one of our IC mission partners lacks the resources to send a recruiter to an event with an outreach partner, ODNI is prohibited from using its available resources to include them. This is an area where we could use help from Congress, and we appreciate the committee's inclusion of the administration's proposal to provide new authorities to ODNI in this area in the FY22 Intelligence Authorization Act. Our other organizational priority, as I mentioned, is to retain our employees after hiring them. And we've learned through pulse surveys, exit interviews, and retention inquiries something about why people stay and leave. We found that the most common reason people leave the organization is a lack of promotion opportunities. Other causes of low retention include lack of fairness and equity in the workplace, insufficient mentoring and guidance, and the lack of identification with the greater organization. We listened to the voices of those surveyed, and we are addressing these issues with employee-led organizations, taking measures to promote fairness and equity, and deliver anti-harassment training. The intelligence community sponsors 6 IC affinity networks that are employee-led voluntary organizations that foster workplace inclusion and collaboration with IC leaders on improving policies to help connect employees to the community. And they include the Latino Intelligence Network, the Women's Intelligence Network, Asian American and Pacific Islander Affinity Network, African American Affinity Network, IC Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Affinity Network, and Deaf and Hard of Hearing IC Affinity Network. Networks like these are not a solution to the challenges we face, but they can help our retention by leading community-wide professional development opportunities and work-life balancing programs. We are also working to remove the structural and cultural barriers that the IC has built up over generations. This community for a long time was known as one that did not value DEIA. It was only a single generation ago that many of our IC agencies had an open, stated policy of not hiring anybody who was LGBTQ+, plus forcing many of our colleagues to hide who they were if they wanted to serve their country. We have corrected our outdated policies since then and made tremendous strides under both Republican and Democratic administrations. The policy that barred service from members of the LGBTQ+ community was abolished, glass ceilings were smashed, doors opened, and ladders climbed. And the fact that I'm here before you today is yet another example of the work all of you have done to promote diversity in the government. So our progress is real and encouraging, but our journey is far from over. In the IC, we know how to work together to support the nation's objectives. Congress created OD&I to do this, and we're bringing that approach to our efforts to increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And this spirit is quintessentially American, to recognize our imperfections and to decide we can do better, to see we have the power to make ourselves better, to work toward a brighter vision of what we might be, what could be, and what will be. We are resolute in this purpose, and I know we will be successful. Thank you.